Okay, I think meanwhile we can just read the preface because this is not the content of the book anyway. So I'll just start from here and we'll see if somebody else is joining us. So the preface, this little book was written to accomplish something big, economic literacy. It is intentionally kept very short to be inviting rather than intimidating, as economic books typically are. If I manage to meet this bar, you, the reader, will gain life-changing understanding of how the economy works in practically no time. This is lots of value at a very low cost. If I've managed to exceed expectations, this book will also make you excited about what economics has to offer. Because economic literacy is mind-opening, sound economic reasoning is an enormously powerful tool for understanding both the economy and society. It uncovers what is going on under the surface and why things are the way they are. In fact, economic literacy is necessary to properly understand the world. But it is also quite possible that I have failed in my undertaking. If so, I would appreciate if you would tell me what you think I've done wrong and how I could have done it better. I'm easy to find online, so please share your comments with me. Please pass the book on to someone else. They might have better luck and get more out of it. At any rate, the book should not have set you back much. It's pretty cheap. And maybe you still learned something. In preparing this manuscript, I benefited from discussions, feedback, suggestions from many people. Special thanks go to Porter Burkett, Susan Byland, Richard Cudgeon, David Gordon, Jonathan Newman, and Michael Norden, who provided feedback on previous drafts of the manuscript. Any errors that still remain are entirely my own fault. My sincere thanks also to many people who generously donated to make this book possible, and to the Mises Institute for giving me this opportunity to make Austrian economic theory available to general public in a short, accessible, and easy to understand format. So I think all of us as Bitcoiners already understand economics to a large extent, but I personally can speak for myself that I have not studied economics to a large extent, only the Bitcoin standard. And my entry to Bitcoin was through Bitcoin and not through understanding economics. Or I had a course in college, but I never really understood it because I think it was due to the fact that it was Keynesian economics. So I never quite understood the axioms itself because they were not even mentioned as axioms that government money is the money that the market uses. So this is just a taken for granted fact that nobody even mentions or talk about. It's just something that we go along with. And the second fact is that inflation itself is considered a part of the economy without understanding fundamentally what it is or why it takes place. So this attempt to start an economics book in Bitshala is to also have a grounding for people who might want it, who might see value in understanding economics, because that's the cornerstone of understanding what Bitcoin is. Okay, I think we are 8:11 Setu, so I'll start with the book now. You're already recording, right?
Yeah, we have started streaming.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, just a quick heads up, guys. Please feel free to interrupt me if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, etc. So this will be a free-flowing conversation because all of us understand economics to a great extent, having studied Bitcoin. So this is more of a discussion-based session than somebody explaining or just reading something. What economics is? Economics is an exciting field. The economics of old sought to uncover how the world works. It showed or even proved that there is a natural order to it. There is structure to the apparent chaos. The economy has something of a life of its own. It has a nature. This means not only that we can study it and learn about its ways, but also that we are not free to tamper with it at will and cannot make it work in ways that we might prefer, but that are not in line with its nature. There are laws by which economy works, and they are immutable. Economics over the past 3 centuries has been about identifying, learning, and understanding those laws. So I was watching Professor Byland's lecture, one of the lectures, and I'll share that link later. But the interesting thing that I think was memorable about that video was how economics has only been relevant to study in the last 300 years, because before that, humans were essentially living the same kind of life for thousands of years. There were paradigm shifting technologies like the printing press, and I think the invention of steam engine is, I think, 500 years old. I might be wrong, but it was only in the last 300 years with industrial revolution becoming mainstream, and with the last 50 and 100 years, computers becoming mainstream and the information economy taking place, that economics became pertinent to understand, because there's clearly an order to how humans are able to create such specialized professions, goods and services that at this point nobody even understands to make a simple pencil or even the simplest service that a team of people can provide. Nobody is able to understand how humans come together to do that. So this is where I find economics to be most interesting. That how can we study that phenomena and how does it work? And continue. Core to understanding the economy is I'm not able to select properly. Yeah. Core to understanding the economy is recognizing that it is about human actions and interactions. In fact, the economy is about people acting and interacting. It is little or nothing else. We tend to think of the economy in terms of resources, machines, businesses, and perhaps jobs, but that is a simplification that is misleading. Those are important, but they are all means to ends. The economy is about using means to attain ends. To put it differently, it is how we act to satisfy our wants, to make us better off. Simply put, the economy is about creating value. Yeah, just a quick thought here that Professor Byron mentioned in our last session as well, that value is something that nobody quite can measure. It's just something that makes us feel better. We just know that we are feeling better off than before. That's why we engage in creating and exchanging value. So it's not a mathematical thing. It's just a human experience that all of us can only speak for ourselves and no, not for any other individual. Our means are limited, but our wants are not. We must figure out how to make as much as possible with the little we have. If we choose to pursue one end, then we cannot use the means to pursue other ends as well. In other words, there is always a trade off. Every choice we make and every action we take means that we forego what we did not choose. Either you take the car for a drive or you stay at home. You cannot do both at the same time. You can use your money to buy one thing or to buy another. Or you can save your money for another time, but the same money cannot be used to buy something and be saved too. Your choice of one thing means you did not and cannot choose the other. By choosing the one thing over another, by acting, we rank things value to us. We economize. The economy is all of us economizing. So, till far, this book does not mention any technical term or give a definition, and yet it does talk about some important ideas. I'll just quickly highlight what I think are them. So, it does not even mention what it means by economizing. It just says that we create value without necessarily defining what value is, and it's how it's defined. I think it is here that every choice we make and every action that we take means that we forego what we did not choose. So, yeah, just a quick thought that it's it's interesting still to me that this book is still to define any terminology. The economy. The economy is an unplanned order. It is what emerges when people go about their business, when we act and interact as we see fit. The French 19th century economist Frederic Bastiat captured this in a question: how does Paris get fed? Living in a large city, Parisians do not produce food but still have abundant access to it. The important question is how this comes to be. After all, there is no central plan for what types and quantities of food are to be offered to Parisians and when. There is no one telling farmers when and what to sow, which land to use for each crop, what tools should use or develop, or in what cities, towns, or market squares to sell their produce at what prices. All of this just happens. The economy is a decentralized and distributed system where all people, farmers and city folk alike, make their own plans and decisions. They do not simply carry out orders from central command. The aim of economics is to understand how an economy, in all its shapes and forms, works. The nature and workings of the overall process of people making their own decisions, acting and interacting as they see fit. The economy lacks both plan and planner. It doesn't even have a goal, it just is. But people have goals, they have needs and wants that they strive to satisfy using different means. Some things are provided by nature, but most of them require the people exert effort, produce them. These are the goods and services that satisfy whatever wants we have. Production is core to the economy. It is about providing as many means as possible to satisfy as many highly valued wants as possible. Yep.
I'd just like to touch on the point that you mentioned that the book does not contain any specific terminologies. I think that will be the approach of the book throughout because that is how orthodox economics was. It did not contain of these terminologies that you'll find in modern or the contemporary economics books like nominal GDP and CPI index and unemployment rate and how they treat the economy as though it's something that is taken into consideration in an adiabatic environment, because the factors that affect an economy, they are so variable that it is not possible for you to deduce a thumb rule or a theorem, where you can just substitute formulas and get answers. And that is the difference I feel between orthodox economics and the mainstream contemporary economics.
Right. It's very people centric in a way, and people centric by its definition means that we have to be humble in being able to understand and estimate what things will look like, because if one thing is sure about life, it is that you can't speak for someone else. And I think this school of economics is very focused on people pursuing their own decisions and trying to satisfy their own needs and wants to how they see fit. And the economy is just emerging as a process of the consequence of people acting on their decisions, instead of it being something that we can predictably make any estimations about. The
I
economic
think
problem
one of the
production.
one of the arguments that I saw, I was watching a video and it was talking about how Austrian economics is centered around people's subjective assessment of value, whereas a lot of classical economics or even the earlier one, Keynesian economics, was is centered around resources. So resources, a view on resources can be aggregated easily. So you can easily say that the bread can be manufactured at 5 rupees and like at 6 rupees, uh, and in a like proper competition, it should ideally sell for some 5 rupees and some paisa because there's a proper competition. So that's one thing that I got in terms of like how do both of these people have a different view of the economy. One is resource centric, one is more of people's marginal value centric. Uh, and there's one commentary, I even asked this question to Professor Per Bailen, which was like, if Austrian economics claims to be people centric, right? Claims in the sense that it says that we will not go into the maths of it, or we should not go into broadcasting of it, or we should not go into maybe business cycles, creating and enhancing business cycles, or changing the interest rates and all of that. uh, so there my com was, it is in people's nature that they would want to gain power, or they would want to sort of run a country or an economy as it suits. So, for example, if it is a political body wherein people are voting for government and the votes are coming from the current population, not from the future population or not from non-human resources, right? They will optimize for that. So whether that requires them to print money and distribute it as welfare fund, or so in a way, my question to him was, Austrian economics should make space for Chicago school or Keynesian school, because that's what is in people's nature, given the kind of politics that we have. So yeah, so that kind of economics is just a byproduct, and Austrian economics should make space for that.
Right.
Was I able to convey my point?
I think you were, and I think there was. So I was watching an interview of Saifuddin and Professor Byron, and there was this conversation about how Austrian economics does not necessarily do away with empirical understanding of the economy and trying to deduce patterns of where resources should be allocated and where there needs to be any change to be made. So I think Austrian economics does not necessarily mean that we are not concerned with numbers and data and trying to understand them. But we are concerned with the axiom that the only axiom that Austrian economics starts with, which is that human action is purposeful behavior. This is the only thing we know for sure, and everything else has to be considered with that axiom. So I'm not sure if there are actual empirical studies which does research in the similar or some parallel way to Keynesian economics, but I think there was this point. So I
Even to
don't think I'll
that
be able
point,
to.
that human actions is purposeful behavior, as in, because we cannot gauge what is most suitable to the person, or what is like the ideal thing for the person to do, what sort of values that person should sort of take action towards. We assume that whatever action the person is taking is in the best interest of that person. Even there's a lot of assumption, because as we have seen through social media, uh, after the advent of social media, and I think it must have been true even before social media, that a lot of people are like sheeps, and you can basically move them to do an action which might not be in the which might not be completely aligned to their self-interest. So even there, I have a small issue with
Right.
the assumption. I know the assumption is legit that we can't go into someone's head, or we can't get into someone's life circumstances. So the best that we can do
Hmm.
is make judgment based on their actions. But yeah, my point
Hmm.
is it's not completely ideal.
Right.
Yes, I think, Setu, I mean, this is a perspective that I'm hearing for the first time. I really find this very interesting that you're right. It's possible for people in power to use resources like entertainment, social media, etc., to influence people's behaviors, to influence their purchasing habits, to influence their education habits, to influence their eating habits, and a lot of things. And yeah, I agree with that, because human action, as we always say, is unpredictable. We can't predict what's going to happen throughout the course of next 1 year. How many people will be born, how many will die, how many people will graduate, what goods and services will be manufactured. But yes, you're correct. With the advent of social media and entertainment, whether it's movies, music, etc., the celebrity hero worship culture, it is absolutely possible for you to influence the behavior of a civilization.
And thereby affect the marginal value of an action. So, for example, even if my gut might, even if a bajra roti might suit my gut more, I'll still go out and consume white bread, because it might be easily available, it might be something that everyone around me is eating. So, I'm not in sync with what is suitable for me. My actions are not in sync with that. So, yeah,
Or it might be because your favorite celebrity is endorsing it on the television.
yeah, equally valid.
Right. But I think human action is defined in Austrian economics to mean that you are intending to make your life better at all points. So even when you are voting for some person who is actually harming you, you are still wanting to make your life better. So by human action, we do not necessarily mean that it is the best course of action that you could have taken. It means that you are doing that to make your life better.
Yeah, because and the assumption therein, because we have no way to know who you are from inside. So the best that we can see is your actions, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And my point
Actions are
is,
very manifested. They are something that somebody can tangibly, at least
yeah,
from
it's
the
tangible.
outside,
Actions are tangible.
see.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. There was this one. I mean, I think there's a word for it. I can't remember. I remember reading it. There's some word that solves some paradox. So, so the action axiom in the Austrian economy. So this is the one line that captures it. Paul Byron argues that attempting to purposeful action as the basis of your behavior actually confirms the concept as the act of repetition itself is a purposeful behavior. So yeah, some people say that it is a paradox because somebody can also say that human action is purposeful behavior, but the paradox is that by saying that you are acting purposefully to deny something. So it becomes more thought now. I mean, at least I feel that it's not something that you can tangibly measure now. Somebody arguing is just something that they are speaking and not really making a tangible difference. But yeah, those are interesting points. These are the ultimate questions every economics or any social science is attempting to tackle. But yeah, let's go ahead. But yeah, again, free feel to interrupt as you have pointed out the points. So the economic problem, production is a problem. It is not simply a matter of how many resources are available. There is no constant relationship between input and output. Very often, more inputs can produce more outputs. It is true. But with innovations, we get more output per input. We increase productivity. There is even more obvious. This is even more obvious when we talk about the value of the output and not just quantity. Value is never automatic. One can use a lot of resources to produce something that turns out to be pretty worthless. If I produce a painting, the expected result would be of little value regardless of what or how much paint I use. The same canvas and paint used by Vincent van Gogh could create something of much higher value. By placing a signature on my painting, it would increase my painting's value, but my signature on his painting would decrease its value. The only relationship that exists between inputs and outputs is that inputs must be used to produce output. We cannot create something out of nothing. So yeah, this is this is the profound statement that it's true even for the birth of the universe, that somehow the entire economy, the mainstream economy at least, has convinced individuals that producing more money out of thin air is helping progress or productivity or development of humanity. But the only relationship that exists in the economy is that inputs produce outputs. There's
I think
no
there
thing.
I have a point to make. Like a lot of people assume that producing itself is good. So I was reading like today itself, like a couple of hours back, I was reading a LinkedIn post by a guy that I follow, and he was mentioning that most of the billionaires lose their $1 billion not because they splurge it, not because they, you know,
Hmm.
sip martinis or they sort of spend it on vacations.
Right.
They go from billionaire to no one because they invest in businesses, or they do things which don't bear fruit. So at times, and because they can't just sit quiet, right? So at times, just producing random garbage is
Hmm.
not right. And like, if you are getting bored, you should you are better off just going for a vacation, sipping martini, than producing random garbage. So that was the whole point. But
Right.
to the point that, economic production itself is not sufficient, you have to understand that this has to be valuable.
Right. Totally. I was having a discussion with my uncle this morning, and he watches CNBC and the stock market updates, and he was questioning that how Bitcoin is doing in comparison to the stock market. And I told him upfront that I am interested in the fundamentals of economics and how human behavior works, and not trying to speculate on which company is going to do the best. So Bitcoin's competition is not the stock market; it is money itself, which is currently US dollar. So what I have observed is that most people are not interested in that, and because US dollar losing value has become the fact of life, people are forced to speculate on investing in the stock market, because now you have to be productive continuously without needing to just be productive once, save wealth, and just live a good life sipping martinis. Now you're forced to invest well, because if you're just sipping martinis, you're losing. So it's ridiculous how misallocation of resources, the extent to which misallocation of resources is taking place in the world right now. I'll continue reading. The economic problem is not production per se, but economizing production. It is about the issue that arises because we do not have more than we can find uses for. In other words, resources are scarce. So it is incumbent upon us to figure out how our resources can be used to produce the best possible outcome in value terms. We have become increasingly good at figuring this out, especially in the last few centuries. For thousands of years, we made very little, but suddenly, with what is referred to as industrialization, nation after nation began lifting itself out of poverty through breakthroughs in production. The interest in economics coincides with this development. So, this is what I was referring to earlier. That economics itself was not of any interest to humans 5,000 years ago. I mean, there's a good reason. There might be some understanding human behavior from a generalist point of view, and not just trying to get his wealth increased. But the study of economics really started to be important when industrialization became mainstream, because we saw this phenomena as we grew up as children, that we just saw wealth around us, and we saw that some nations are so. Adam Smith's book that Byron mentioned in one of his lectures was understanding the cause of wealth of nation of states. I think that was
I think a
the
treatise
first.
into the causes of the wealth of the
Right.
nations.
Right. Yep. So I think Byron mentioned that that was the first formal introduction to economics as a subject itself, because before that, humans generally, there was no formal document of humans studying the economy as a concept itself. So I'll Google that later. But I think I have a question for you guys. I remember I asked this Faisal once when I met him for the first time, that what do you think is the most important or interesting or the most breakthrough invention that humanity has made? So this line mentioned it here, right? That nation after nation began lifting itself out of poverty through breakthrough in production. The interest in the economy coincides with this development. So just a question that I want to throw to you guys: what do you think is the biggest invention that humanity has made?
I think machines don't get enough credit, like steam engine. Is, I would say,
Hmm.
like one of the biggest inventions. Of course, like printing press and wheel and fire and languages are like backbone, but I also believe like steam engine and like factories was a massive invention.
like as far as I'm concerned, I would like bifurcate these inventions into two sections. One is the invention itself, okay, and a second is the impact that the invention created. I feel that every invention that you talk about, whether it's fire, whether it's the wheel, whether it's electricity, whether it's the computer, whether it's the internet, whether it's the automobiles, whether it's the airplanes, whether it's the smartphone, I think it was very relevant and very important in accordance with the time and age in which it was discovered. So I feel that you cannot, I personally cannot categorize them that this is number one, this is number two. In their era and age, they were the most needed. I mean, if somebody would have invented a smartphone, let's say before automobiles, maybe it would not have been that relevant, because a lot of technology that has been that I mean a lot of things that rely on automobiles were useful for manufacturing smartphones. Like for instance, you transport smartphones, let's say using automobiles and you using airplanes. So if you would have manufactured a phone maybe before the advent of airplanes or cars, maybe the transport would not have been possible. So I feel that each invention from fire to smartphones is very important in accordance with its time and era. But as far as impact is concerned, this is my personal belief. I believe that Bitcoin has the potential to be the most impactful invention in the history of human civilization. Okay. Now, a lot of people might say that Bitcoin relies on electricity, Bitcoin relies on computers, Bitcoin relies on software, ABCD. So, if these things would not have existed, Bitcoin would not have existed. So, that means electricity is more important than and software is more important and computer is more important. Okay. So, I'm not talking about the invention itself, I'm talking about the impact that Bitcoin creates. Okay. There's no doubt that it relies on electricity, it relies on software, it relies on computers, ABCD, but the impact that Bitcoin creates, I feel that it is absolutely unparalleled, because the search and the quest for sound money has existed since inception of human life on Earth. And every civilization has not tried to invent a car. Every civilization has not tried to invent computers. Every civilization has not tried to invent the airplanes, right? But since humans have existed on this planet, they have always, every civilization, every generation after generation, for millions of years, since this world has been in existence, humans have always been in quest of one thing, and that is sound money. And for millions of years or billions of years, I have no archaeological data as to how long or how old the earth is, but since this planet has existed, humans have consequently and subsequently, time and again, generation after generation, civilization after civilization, failed to find that sound money, right? Humans attempted to make an automobile, they succeeded. Humans attempted to invent wheel, they succeeded. Humans attempted to make electricity, they succeeded. That same generation succeeded, or at the most, the subsequent generation succeeded. But since the first man set foot on earth, humans have been trying to find sound money. And as far as the data that we have, for millions of years or for billions of years, humans have always failed to find sound money. And I finally feel that quest ends with Bitcoin. So my opinion is that Bitcoin is the greatest and the most impactful invention in the history of human civilization.
That was beautiful. I think this is the point of these that come to an answer about. Come as and read this book, but it's things like those that Faisal just said. I'm glad that we have this recorded, because I remember Faisal, you said the same thing when we met, that Bitcoin is in your opinion, is the greatest invention that humanity has made, and I completely agree, because I'm also just boggled by the possibility that it creates. So the metric that you came with, that it's the impact that it has the potential of creating. And I think Bitcoin, I agree, has a ridiculously crazy, unimaginable amount of impact if it succeeds. Still an experiment, a 15-year-old experiment. So we are yet to go. I mean, it's yet to become relevant to majority of. But yeah,
I have an
I think
observation. Yeah, that was a beautiful point made. Well made, Fazal. One of the points that I just wanted to make on that one comment is basically a comment on that is is like if you look into the history of like electricity, I'm very sure like someone must have noticed that electricity falls from the cloud, but that is it. That must be it. Electrical engineering or electricity as a subject must have come to the fore when people started using like batteries, photovoltaic cell, and all that, and that's when like electricity exploded and magnetism exploded, and and after a certain time, like someone made chips out of it, and then electronics exploded out after that. Similarly, economics, right? When such certain countries got more wealth than other countries, and these countries were getting wealthy because of ingenious contracts or because of their way of organization or because of industrial scale of manufacturing, it just it just like other people's minds just boggled as to how are these countries getting richer and richer, and that's what fueled the rise of economics. I'm very sure, like in that sense, like some part of economics is very very old. Like people were studying about how should states manage their finances, how should the taxation policy be, but that's it. Similarly, in case of money, there was quest. So people had tried trying shells, and people had tried using yap stones and gold and all those variations. But I think once Bitcoin sort of settles the debate, and in a couple of years in our lifetime, or maybe after lifetime, Bitcoin will be like one of those. I think, I mean, one of those branches. So it will not be a part of economics. It will be its own branch, which
Right.
will be sitting at the intersection of how do you run governance to how do you manage money, or how do you sort
Right.
of manage economics, all of it.
Totally. Totally. I'm also interested in how Austrian economics, for all its depth in knowledge, actually does not, I think, talk about absolute scarcity at all. So Professor Byron also mentioned that he does not think that Bitcoin is currently money. It's still an experiment, and I think Austrian economics does not talk. It does talk about sound money, but does not talk about absolute scarcity at all. And I think I might be misreading you, but say to the point that is how humans did see some form of electricity, even if they were not able to understand how it works. But absolute scarcity, which Bitcoin is, it's not just. I mean, it is money, but it's not just money uh, which is peer to peer. I mean, those things are something that Bitcoin has enabled. But the primary invention that, or the primary paradigm shifting invention, is that there's something absolutely scarce in this universe, which becomes the best money by default, because money is an insurance against uncertainty. And in 2024, if you're able to say that in 2140 there will only be 21 million Bitcoin, there's no better absolute certainty that any human can ever come up with. So, in my mind, Bitcoin is a thing of its own. It's not something that humans have ever been able to do before Bitcoin became a thing. So, I know that Bitcoin has been attempted to be made, or maybe like Henry Ford or Buckminster Fuller did mention it, that we need a money which is outside of the. I think F.A. Hayek said that, but Fullerene Buckminster Fullerene made some remark on energy money,
Yeah.
which was the Bitcoin in his mind, even if he did not
Ford
envision the
also made a
technology
similar
that would.
comment.
And
Ford, Keynes,
right?
all of them made
Right.
like very similar
Even
comments.
Tesla made a point about how the next. I think a point about how the wars will be fought by machines, and it's. I mean, we have come to the point where machines fighting wars. It's the miners fighting for the next block, which is the actual war that we can now afford. So yeah, it's interesting that it was always there, but only after Bitcoin. Now we have a thing called Bitcoiners, which study Bitcoin deeply. So it's a totally new world in a way.
And a lot
I
of
have
times,
an yeah. So, go ahead, sir.
no, so it's just a minor point, but Fazil, you can also pick it up, and then I can maybe talk about.
Right. So I have this issue with the usage of terminology scarce in context of Bitcoin, because gold is scarce, right? Gold is scarce because every year the amount of gold that is mined is 1.5 to 2% as compared to the existing gold in the world, right? But I do not know if scarce is an appropriate terminology to use for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is finite. There's a difference between scarce and finite, right? Gold is scarce. Every year you will find 1.5 to 2% gold. Even after 1,000 years, if the world exists and nothing like catastrophic happens, you will still find 2% gold after 1,000 years, after 2,000 years, after 5,000 years, right? But Bitcoin is finite. After 21 million Bitcoins are mined, then nothing on this planet, at least mathematically and computationally, can produce one single sat. So Bitcoin, I personally feel, is not scarce, it's finite, and that is what makes it unique. We've had scarce resources before Bitcoin as well. What makes it unique and unprecedented is that it's not scarce, it's finite.
Right, right. I think the important point is that I mentioned was, so I mean it's one amount that we can say that exists in the entire universe is of Bitcoin. And this is finite is the, I think, the more approved.
I think
Yeah, any points, Shipu?
my small point was like a lot of times we look retrospectively, and we probably wonder what an amazing discovery it was. Uh, but like the time when it was discovered, or the time when it came to the fore, even the makers didn't think it was such an amazing discovery. For example, look at the story of fire, or look at the story of wheel, right? If you look at the story of fire, everything today requires the fire is like sitting at the center of everything that is around us, or electricity for that matter. But the
Right.
first person who might have created a cell with two elements of opposing nature, and like using some sort of wire to make the electron flow from one sort of element to another element side, would not have thought that this is such a big deal. Similarly, like the first first experiment by Faraday's or Maxwell's, when a change in electrical field might have created a magnetic field, uh, might not have been such a big deal to them. But looking, like, if we look in the hourglass, and if we look back in the rear glass, and we sort of see,
Right.
we might just wonder what an amazing discovery it was. Similarly, I think with Bitcoin, like when the makers were making, Satoshi was making Bitcoin, I'm not sure like he would have like marveled at the beauty of Bitcoin, as what an amazing discovery I have made, like finite Bitcoin and all that. I think retrospectively we talk about what an amazing thing it is, but like we should be mindful that things will be built on top of it. And like, yeah, like electricity and magnetism did not remain the in thing for a really long time. You had semiconductors coming in, and the whole space of the way in which we move, you know, create magnetic field using electrical field, and use create electrical field using magnetic field, sort of got revolutionized in 50 years, and people completely forget all that invention and move to electronics. Similarly, Bitcoin has come around, and it's amazing, it's magnificent, but in due course of time it will be like one of the technologies that works somewhere, and like people would have built like massive layers on top of it to get whatever it is that they want to get. So yeah.
Right. Our kids are definitely going to take Bitcoin for granted. They are not going to buy it.
Exactly, and also, I mean, it's like they will not be able to truly appreciate the beauty of it, because they never had to work for it.
Right.
They probably, they never had, they might not never have to face that social stigma, that opposition, that isolation that we go through in every gathering, in every social event. Wherever we go to, we label as Bitcoiners and lunatics, and anarchists, or whatever, or money launderers, or whatnot. And we even face opposition from people around us. So that actually makes you value Bitcoin even more, because when you suffer more to attain something, you treasure it more. So I think people who get it by default, they might inherit it or whatever, they might never be able to value. So I feel, apart from our generation, there's going to be no generation that's going to be valuing Bitcoin the way we do. It's unique to us. This feeling of valuing Bitcoin to the extent that we do, I think no generation before us and no generation after us will be able to do that or live that moment.
True.
So now let's read some text.
Let's go ahead. Hence the title of Adam Smith's hugely influential treatise, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. The title brings attention to the two dimensions, wealth, prosperity, that are still core to economics. The nature of wealth and its causes. The nature of wealth refers to how we should understand it, what comprises it, and how the economy as a system relates to the theory of value as personal satisfaction. The causes of wealth refers to the origins and particular processes that brought this prosperity about. If we understand them properly, we can lift people out of poverty and create an ever more prosperous society. Economics, as the study of how the economy works, is consequently also the science of how prosperity is created. So Mango mentioned this in the session with Professor, that I think it was some tweet by Professor, that the question is not what causes poverty, the question is what causes prosperity, because somebody has had to exert effort to be able to produce nice things that we use. So the poverty is a natural lot of things. If you leave a human alone, he will have to figure out how to feed himself. But to feed himself, he will have to exert effort. The question is more how we can create prosperity, and that's the science of economics. Economics as understanding To be an economist is to be a student of of the economy as an ongoing process. The aim is to understand how it works and its nature. It is about figuring out the nature and causes of universal mechanisms, and order that we identify as the economy. From this, we learn about prosperity and, importantly, how to produce more of it and make sure more people benefit from it. So, yeah, so this runs contrary to how current economic economists work. I don't think current economists do think, at least in the Keynesian school, about how more people benefit from it. But for our sake, as students of economics, is to understand the prosperity and how we can produce to benefit people more. To form an understanding of how economy works, we must be humble before the fact that it exists and there is an order to it. It has a nature. The task of the economist is not to predict the specifics of the future, but to uncover the underlying processes that produce the economic outcomes that we can observe. In other words, we must develop a logic for understanding aggregate economic phenomena and behavior, an economic theory. Economics is a framework for how to think and reason about the economy, for making sense of what is going on, an intuition, if you will. It follows that learning economics is fundamentally about gaining economic literacy so we can better understand the world we are part of. The real world, not the invented world as we find in civilized models. As Ludwig von Mises put it, economics deals with real men, weak and subject to error as he is, not with ideal beings, omniscient and perfect as only gods could be. Yes, exactly. So, just a question or a thought I wanted to ask you guys. I think, or this could be my opinion, that generally, as kids or in general, also humans wonder about how the universe works a lot. But for some reason, I think most humans just take economy for granted. So, if you talk to your average friend, he might have a better idea of quantum mechanics than economics, which I find very fascinating. One reason is, of course, has to do with how we are taught as mandatory subjects in school, the basics of quantum mechanics. But economics, somehow, even being a subject, is not talk about or find interesting or see a problem with now as we know as Bitcoin is the taboo that comes with when you want to talk about Bitcoin and so on. So so yeah, just to highlight how somehow economics somehow has become a subject which remains to tickle the fancy of most humans, even though it is then understanding quantum mechanics to a certain extent, because every carpenter, every plumber, every chai wala needs to care about economics, but only a handful of people need to care about quantum mechanics.
And I feel this is not a happenstance. This is intentional. I mean, people are intentionally prevented from acquiring knowledge that people in authority don't want them to acquire, and that is why I really relate to this metaphor that we're living in a matrix. Not referring to the Hollywood movie, but by matrix, I mean that in a pre-programmed world where we are taught what to do, where we are given a piece of paper and told that this is money, and generations after generations we never questioned it. When you question maybe why this piece of paper is valuable, but maybe your father and my father never questioned it. My grandfather and my great grandfather also never questioned it. So it's basically, we've been living in a matrix where there are some people in authority who have pre-programmed us. They decide what subjects we study, they decide what food we eat, they decide what clothes we wear, they decide our behavior. And that is why they've come up with this conventional or contemporary branch of economics, because they know now they are in a situation to kind of inculcate this a herd behavior where they can basically dictate terms and they can pre-predict your actions, and based on that they can obviously predict the economy. If they want the economy to behave in a certain way, they will influence human action, and the economy will go in the direction that they want it to go. And once you learn how the economy functions, then you'll start questioning it. There's a very nice book. I can't remember the name of it. I read it. I have it in my Kindle. I'll share the name later, which actually talks about how marketing influences your behavior, and how people in power use marketing as a very strong tool to influence people's purchasing behavior. Like, for instance, I mean, you'll find people uh, who people try to live much beyond their means. Like for instance, it could be using phones or whatever, which is way beyond their mean, and it's possible to influence that behavior. You can get a popular celebrity and the fans will just start buying that specific phone even if they can't afford it. So that CEO of that company has already predicted that if I hire this celebrity and pay him X amount of money, he has Y amount of fans. Out of his Z amount of fans will definitely buy this phone, whether they can afford it or not, whether they have to incur debt or whether they have to sell their assets, they'll do it and buy that good or that service. So yeah, I think it's a very relevant metaphor that we live in matrix where people in power, whether it's CEOs of the companies or whether it's politicians, they kind of pre-predict our behavior, influence our behavior, and we prevent from studying what actual economics is, so that we don't fall out of that matrix.
Totally.
I think there's this book that I've recently started reading. There are a lot of good books on economics, but there's this new book that I found out about, and I've commented, I've shared it on the chat. It's called GOAT, Who is the Greatest Economist of All Time and Why Does It Matter? So Tyler Cowen is an economist, and he, for like a couple of years back, he got into a rabbit hole of AI, and sort of he started talking about a lot of stuff, and he created a book out of it. Like when ChatGPT 4 came out, he created a book out of it wherein you can talk to the book. You don't have to read the book. You can talk to the book. You can ask questions, and it will give you answer depending upon different sort of economics or different sort of economists' point of view. So it's pretty interesting. If you want to take a shot at it, you can try it. I have just started on it. I think talking about economics books, I thought I'll mention it in the chat.
Right. So is it a long book? Just to get an idea if we can cover it maybe one of our future, or do you think it's just personal reading is more suited to it?
I think we can take it up in the next session. You open up the book, you go to ChatGPT 4 interface or Claude interface, and then it gives you some summary. You start asking it questions. So it's more than book; it's a conversation. If you're not into reading, you can converse with the book.
Right. So we'll start chapter 2. Let's see how much we can cover in 5 minutes. Economic theory. Like other sciences and fields of study, economics is a body of theory. Theory is a collection of explanations that allow us to understand something. Economic theory allows us to understand how it works. It explains the working of the economy as a whole so that we can understand the meaning, impact, origins, and evolution of economic phenomena. For theory to be reliable and useful, it must provide a coherent picture. If it doesn't, then some of its explanations are contradictory. Contradictions are a sign that something is wrong. So the body of a theory must be logically stringent and must make up a consistent whole. This means it must be consistent with the basic assumptions on which it rests. It must be true to first principles. But it is not enough to produce a consistent whole based on if those principles are themselves flawed. After all, it is possible to produce an internally consistent theory based on faulty assumptions. Such systems can appear very convincing because they are consistent, but they still fail to provide real understanding because every explanation hinges on something that is not true and is perhaps not even reasonable. You would not want to cross a bridge designed by an engineer who believes paper is stronger than iron. It doesn't matter how accurate the math used is or how sophisticated the design. The assumption is wrong, and therefore the bridge is not reliable. It cannot hold the expected weight, even if all the calculations are accurate. The same is true with economic theory. It must be built and reliable. Consequently, for a theory to properly explain how the world works, it must be internally consistent and based on two. A theory cannot meet only one of those criteria and still provides us with a real understanding of the world. It must meet both. So before we understand economic theory by Ostrowski, I think important as the book that we need to understand the assumptions that we're making to make any deductions about economy or human behavior. We need to understand that those assumptions are correct. Because this is calling out Keynesian economics straight away because it's not based on first principle. It's not defining every term is used or is considered, especially the terms that are constantly appearing. So it makes calculations then which add up and somehow convince you to understand economics, but it's not based on any assumptions that are questioned or based on first principles. And I think this is a phrase you guys might have found a lot, that economics suffers from physics envy. So physics is a subject of how universe works on a matter and energy level. So these things are objective because these things are not subjective, and energy and matter behave the same way as they have been behaving for millions of billions of years. So even something as weird and mysterious mechanics still behaves predictably once you are able to understand its behavior. But human behavior, for all our understanding of it, cannot be deduced to one axiom. So economics does suffer from in the of physics that we cannot any simple axiom. But yeah, the next section covers the starting point. Economics is based in the concept of human action as purposeful behavior. What this means is that when people act, they try to achieve something. It does not mean that they are always accurate or do the right thing, whatever that is, but it means the reason they try to achieve it is that they value the expected outcome in some way. What they value, why they value it, and whether it's rational is irrelevant. Such things lie beyond the scope of economic theory. What matters is that their action is motivated by the expected outcome. It may appear strange that economics does not deal with why people value some things and but not others, but it does not. People's dreams, fantasies, and imagination only have economic relevance if they are acted upon. After all, if you have a dream that you do not act on, you are not making it happen. It remains but a dream. The dream itself makes no difference in the world, merely wishing does not make it real. So, action is a rather logical starting point for studying social reality. Acting is how we make changes to the world. Yep. So we have reached the 9 mark, and I wanted to just have you guys give your thoughts on how we want to conduct these sessions. My initial schedule that I had made was to have completed 5 sessions. So we have completed, I think, the first chapter of the first part, and the first part of the second chapter. So I think if we go by this pace, it will take us more than 5 sessions, sure. But any thoughts that you think we should aim at in covering this book?
I'm fine with the pace. I think uh, we shouldn't deprive ourselves of the discussion and just read through the passages without pondering on them. So I'm fine, even if it takes a couple of extra weeks. I think we should be fine.
I agree. It's not that we're doing this for an audience. We're all learning. The primary purpose of doing this to get value for ourselves. So I think I'm happy with the pace that we're currently taking.
Right.
Okay, so we have reached 9. If you want to wrap, we can go ahead next week.
Yep, cool with me.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.